Hello and welcome to another episode of the Monday Night Wars. It is May 20th, 1996, the day after Slamboree, and we are live with WCW at the Monroe Civic Center in Monroe, Louisiana. I am Scott, and with me is Joseph. Joseph, how are you?
I am fantastic, Scott. How about yourself?
Wow, that's great to hear. I'm all right. Oh.
How do we pick you up, man? How do we get you to my level?
With some great matches.
I think we got some tonight.
Yeah, so let's get into it. We start with a recap of Slamboree. So you get all that. And if you want to know everything that happened, because I'm not going to tell you what happened in Slamboree, you got to listen to the Patreon to find out what happened in Slamboree. Ha! Gotcha, suckers. Anyways.
Wait, why? We do that out of the kindness of our own heart. You don't got to call them suckers.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, our Patreon listeners are not the suckers. People who aren't subscribing to the Patreon are the suckers because they're not getting Slamboree content. That's what I'm saying.
It really is only $2 a month. It's not a lot when you really think
that's an incredible deal.
Yeah. And when we start getting into like the Thursday night episodes, those will be going on there. Those aren't going on here.
Oh, man, we're going to have so much podcasts to do.
I know. We got to figure out how to do those.
Yeah. We had this plan to start kind of winding these down from an hour to 30 minutes, and so far it ain't working. We'll have to figure it out because this is the last Nitro. This one's 90 minutes, but we're going to 2 hours next week. They're giving us a little taste of 2 hours, but it's over. We got to get our shit together because next week is 2 hours of Nitro. Oh,
you know what we'll probably do is if you listen to the Patreon, just $2 a month. What we did with that one is that particular pay-per-view, Slamboree, had what I counted was 19 segments, and it might have had a little bit more. I can't remember, but it was a lot of matches. So what we did on that one to kind of keep us within the time frame is we just kind of really quickly talked about the ones that were, if it was just a simple match, just tell you the details real quickly, how he felt about it, and then moved on and really deep dived into the big storylines going on. So we might do something similar because we don't want this. We don't want you guys to have to feel like you have to spend 2 hours listening to us. That's
unless you want to. Send us letters. If you want a 3-hour podcast, you let us know. We'll do that for you. Because at some point they go to 3 hours too. I mean, God help us.
Yeah. Luckily that's short-lived because they don't do well when that happens.
Yeah, no, I agree. I gotta say, I do think we handled Slamboree really well, where you kind of focused on giving us the blow-by-blow of the matches, and I really just kind of focused on the in-between stuff. I thought it was a good division of labor, so maybe we'll have to give that a try going forward.
Sounds good, man.
We'll see how it goes. Well, anyways, like I said, they're moving to 2 hours next week, and I hope that they have some interesting content that will justify that amount of time.
I don't know. I can't imagine anything groundbreaking could happen in 2 hours next week.
Whoa. Well, I guess we'll just have to see. But for now, we got our first match. And we got Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, the Steiner brothers, as I believe they're called, against Fire and Ice. Ice Train and Scott Norton. Joseph, this ends in a double countout. 5 minutes, 29 seconds, but we like these guys. So tell me more about it.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. Like you said, it does end in a double count out. These are 4 meaty men slapping meat. We like all 4 guys in the ring. It's a great matchup. They do a very good job. One thing I like is when big guys don't do immediately like tests of strength. Like they're actually wrestling, which is really, really fun. It's also the second time we've seen this matchup, and I think in the last like 3 or 4 weeks. And this was, Fire and Ice's debut was actually against the Steiner brothers. And that one resulted in the Steiners losing. I was thinking about it when I was watching this, like, will they tie up the series? Instead, what they do with the double countout is they seem to be starting a rivalry between these two tag teams. And I honestly am for that, if that's where they're going to go. So it got to be for me.
Yeah. And, as I said, it ends in a double countout because they go to the floor and they just brawl. They brawl all over the place. They brawl the ramping out, and some say they're fighting to this day.
Well, I mean, I don't think Ice Train is.
Why'd you have to go there, man?
I just beat you to the punch.
Rest in peace, Ice Train. We loved you, man.
Still do, actually, to be clear. The love has not ended.
There's a scene at the end of Iron Claw. Let me tell you, man, I got like the last 10, 15 minutes of Iron Claw. Room might have got a little dusty. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, there's a moment in there, my god. It's a good movie. Ladies and gentlemen, Iron Claw is a good movie, but it is rough as hell. So you definitely need to be prepared for what you're if you don't know the story of the Von Erichs and you're going into Iron Claw thinking you're just getting a wrestling movie, be forewarned.
I had coworkers who genuinely were like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go see this movie," and I was like, "You know what it's about, right?" And they were just like, "Oh, it's just like," and I was like, "Oh, um, have fun with that." And then they just come back shell shocked.
My wife watched it with me. I gave her a little bit of a heads up before, but like mostly through me, she's like, "Oh my god!" Like, yeah. Honestly though, has any wrestling movie been positive? The Wrestlers are rough as hell movie too, so maybe you shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, especially when you talk about the era. I mean,
Yeah.
you could probably make one about modern day wrestling, and it could be decent, but anything pre 2000 is going to be pretty rough.
Well, let's get back to the pre-2000s because we got another match. We got Ric Flair and Eddie Guerrero. Eddie's getting a shot because Ric Flair kind of just treated him like the help last night, and I guess that caused some friction among the two. They give us a hell of a match. I like this one, Joseph. What did you think about this?
Yeah, that's got a B plus for me. Eddie Guerrero forces Ric Flair to lose his cool, which I think is a great touch. And it's really because I wouldn't say out wrestling him. I don't know if you can out wrestle Ric Flair, but he's keeping up with him, right? What Ric Flair normally does isn't working. And that makes Eddie, or not Eddie, it makes Rick kind of lose his marbles a little bit. He goes out of the ring. Him and the ref start pushing each other. And Bischoff talks about how refs have taken a lot of guff lately and they're starting to push back. And if that's true, refs have no idea how bad it's going to get for them. At some point in this, we get a patented Ric Flair ass shot, which I think is required in his contract for all matches. This match is kind of a slight storyline, like you mentioned. It did bleed over from the previous night where Eddie kind of got screwed in his chase for the Lord of the Ring. Eddie puts Ric Flair in a figure four, which I think is a great touch. Also, because this is just pure speculation, I don't think Rick would have let anybody do that if he didn't respect them. And so that's a really, really nice touch. Bischoff says Mach can't be around because every week they've beefed up security, which I think is hilarious because not only the fact that it hasn't stopped Mach yet, but also like what happens potentially next week if you beefed up security, you didn't do a great job of it. Flair
Well,
cheats.
I will say,
What?
security stopped him on Nitro last week, but then he ran through them like paper at Slamboree. So I'm
Yeah,
not really sure what's going on here.
yeah. Flair wins this match. He cheats by holding the rope during his pin. It's the right outcome, but it is a B plus match. They do a very good job. And again, I kind of hope that they continue Eddie with this small rivalry with the Four Horsemen. I don't know how much further this will go, but I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I think it's about done. But you're right. This really should have been a moment to elevate Guerrero because it was really good, right? Flair just kind of treats him like this is just another day at the office for Ric Flair, right? But then Eddie gives him a run for his money and it pisses Ric Flair off. And it was a great dynamic. Really enjoyed it. After, though, Ric Flair needs to cool off. So he goes over to the VIP table and Mean Gene joins him there, despite what we've heard that security is keeping Macho out. Gene's heard a bit of a rumor that Savage is in the building. Ric Flair's not worried. He also says that Kevin Green shouldn't come either, that he's coming into Flair country and he doesn't have permission. I didn't know they checked your passport entering Flair country and you could get denied, but apparently you can. And so Ric Flair says Kevin Green does not have permission to enter Flair country. They also give Bobby some of the food, some of the fare from the VIP table. They send some over to the announce table. Very nice of them. Bobby's very grateful. What'd you think about this one?
I enjoyed it. There's not a whole lot to talk about more than what you just said, but I enjoyed it because not only do they give Bobby some food, but it actually bleeds right into the next segment where Flair joins on commentary. And I thought it was a really nice transition from match to promo to commentary.
And there you have it. Flair's on commentary. We got the WCW World Tag Team Champions, Sting and Lex Luger, versus the Faces of Fear. We like Sting. We like Goofy Lex. We like the Faces of Fear. This is a good match. 10 minutes, 52 seconds. Lex and Sting win, of course, because we got a storyline going with them being tag team partners. So we got to keep that. We got to keep that train rolling, and they do. What'd you think? As you see, Joseph, I'm trying the Slamboree run of the show here, seeing how it works. What'd you
I
think?
I noticed that. I appreciate that because it's got me in kind of a groove. So, like you said, Flair joins commentary and he points out that Sting is the best athlete in WCW according to Ric Flair, but that he can't be 100% after last night. It's a really good take from Flair. Flair is honestly pretty good on commentary. On top of that, he's always been great at putting someone over, right? He's the best athlete in WCW while also being able to backhand them with he's not 100% after last night. He does that routinely in his promos, and he's very, very good at it. Sting takes a huge beating in this tag team match, as he seems to do in all his tag team matches, and the Faces of Fear are punishing him with a myriad of great tag team moves. There's a moment where they do a double diving headbutt, and it's really, really good. Eventually, Sting finally gets a tag, and a healthy Lex Luger kind of steamrolls the Faces of Fear. I'm not saying that they jobbed out to him. They wrestled for a long while with Sting before Healthy Lex came in and won the match. It's a really fun tag team title match. The right team won. I enjoyed it. Gotta be.
Yeah, it's a good one. I can't say anything more. You know, I do have to go back though, because I don't think I mentioned this previously, talking about the Eddie Guerrero Ric Flair match, but it's important. That match was almost 20 minutes long. That's how long Eddie gave Rick a run for his money, which just goes to show how great that match was again. But again, moving back to this one, the tag team match, it was fun. I enjoyed it. After the match, Randy Savage is in the arena, but security is preventing him from getting through. He's here. He wants in. Security says, no, you can't do it. I mean, it's a pretty big place. He probably could just go try somewhere else. How many security guards do they have? They seem to all be here, unless they've got thousands of them. Mean Gene's been on the phone with the boardroom, with the WCW boardroom, and they're concerned about Macho, his future with the company, because he's friggin' lost it. Macho tries to just spear himself through the door, doesn't work, but Flair had a good laugh about it. He chuckles, which I thought was fun. What'd you think?
You tell them to be real careful about what they do with my future. That's really the only line I picked out of this promo. It's a lot of fun. I thought it got to be for me. I really enjoyed Mach repeatedly trying to get in, security repeatedly pushing him out. Mean Gene treating him kind of like he is this crazy individual, almost like he doesn't really want to be there with the interview. And I thought that was a really nice touch. And then the last note that you had was actually my last note too, which is that Flair cackles at Mach for not being able to get in. And I think that absolutely heightened the segment. Flair does a very good job of making fun of Mach during this.
It was great. This rivalry is great because you got two of the greatest performers of all time, two of the greatest mic guys of all time going at it. I could watch Macho Man and Ric Flair go at it forever. That might be heaven for us.
And
Just an
some say they still are to this day.
Some say they still are. Yeah. So heaven might be a Macho Man Ric Flair match forever, or at least a storyline. I don't know. But we got to keep rolling. Next up, we got Diamond Dallas Page and we got Brad Armstrong. Really of note on this is what happened after the match, Joseph, and the convoluted explanation of why DDP isn't going to get a title shot. But I'll let you talk about the match, then we can talk about that.
So DDP has some great late 90s, early 2000s sunglasses. I hear that they're the best. It's a rumor that's been going around. Ric Flair says that Brad Armstrong is one of the best wrestlers working today. He's not wrong. Armstrong is very good in the ring. He's an incredible wrestler, and this match really shows why. His problem is he's just incredibly vanilla. There's nothing really to his character, which is unfortunate. Also, I can't believe Ric Flair has been on commentary this long. DDP wins, and this is kind of the beginning of a push that will last for many years. He wins with a diamond cutter. It's a pretty simple match, all things considered. It got to be for me. But I did want to talk about what this kind of starts for him, really from the previous night at winning the Lord of the Rings, but going on. A lot of people in the past have attributed his push to the fact that he is neighbors and friends with Eric Bischoff at this time. There's some truth to that being the reason for his push. But Bischoff was also very candid with Diamond Dallas Page for many years. When we get to the NWO eventually, Diamond Dallas Page actually lobbies to be, I believe, the third member, that hidden member that they're talking about. And Bischoff flat out rejected him and said, essentially, who are you? And what he means by that is, at this moment in wrestling, DDP is just kind of a speck in the history of wrestling. He hasn't done anything worthy to be this big spot. And that might sound harsh, but it's the right call. And it forces DDP to really elevate his game even further. If DDP did receive a push because of Bischoff, I have to be honest, I'm 1,000% okay with that. From a simple character standpoint, there are very few wrestlers who ever age as well as DDP. From a wrestling standpoint, there are very few wrestlers who have ever aged as well as DDP. He put in the time and effort to excel. And then from a personal standpoint, DDP's done more good in the world of wrestling and specifically for his fellow wrestlers than 99.99% of the industry. So if you honestly have a problem with DDP, you're the problem. After the match, DDP cuts a promo with Mean Gene, and he points out all the men who were in Lord of the Rings tournament. It's an impressive list, and he points out that he technically beat all of them, including people like Flair and Mach, which is technically true.
Frodo, Sam, Eagle.
Yeah. He gives himself a self high five, which is not the first self high five in DDP's history. We just saw one last night, which we talk about on the Patreon. So subscribe. I love DDP. He does a great job. And then WCW, the executive committee, has told Mean Gene that they reviewed the tape of the match. And technically, during the match, he goes over the ropes and one of his feet touches the ground. They detail that he should have been eliminated. It's not Royal Rumble rules where both feet have touched the ground. Apparently in WCW, one foot touches, you're out. The refs didn't catch it. He continued with the match. And so they said, you did technically win. We are going to honor the fact that you are the very first Lord of the Ring, but we're going to rescind your WCW world title shot, and it gets given to Lex Luger instead. And DDP is livid, as he should be. Kind of weird that they kind of pulled that part back. I don't really know if the storyline wise they intended to do that. I thought that was a little bit odd, but I really like how DDP sold this whole thing.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to your point that if it was Eric Bischoff gave DDP a push, I don't care because DDP is great. So if Eric saw something in him, fine, because DDP becomes one of the most important parts of WCW. I get the point the WCW title shot from him because, as you said, he's kind of a nobody at this point. Like, I don't understand, but then just don't have him win the Battle Royal. Have someone else win it. So I don't really get that part, but whatever. But like I said, isn't this like the second time he's had the title stolen from him? I think they did this before, right? Where he earned a title shot that he never got. Which I think that one they just never said anything about it. It was just kind of ignored. But this one, at least, they're making a justification.
Yeah, they're making a justification and not an apology. I really just enjoyed, honestly, what they did with this. I thought from what they're trying to make work in this, I think it does work. He still gets the quote unquote rub, insider term. They push him with the fact that he is Lord of the Ring champion. He will keep the ring, which will be part of his character for the next so many weeks and months, and he does a really good job with it. So overall, I'm kind of okay with everything. I think it was a little bit early to just go, hey, here's your WCW championship, slot. But also, he kind of turns this Lord of the Ring character into something, and so it overall will be okay.
After that, we got our main event. We got the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, the Giant, versus Arn Anderson, with Kevin Sullivan in his corner for some reason. I don't know. Anyways, the Giant wins. 3 minutes, 38 seconds. What'd you think, Joseph?
I gave this a D. I think this is the one really bad moment of the night. This doesn't really do anything for anyone. Giant comes out with Taskmaster's music as part of the Dungeon of Doom. That's the Dungeon of Doom music. But Taskmaster, for some reason, is with Arn. And then Taskmaster doesn't really play a factor into the ending of this match. And Giant wins. And Taskmaster doesn't really do anything for Arn or for the Giant. It's a really, really solid show overall, but an incredibly clunky ending.
Yeah, and it's kind of abrupt too, right? Because the match is over and everyone leaves. Ric Flair immediately leaves. Bobby leaves shortly thereafter, and it's over. We're done.
Yeah.
End of the night.
And Flair had been hyping this. He'd been talking about how they really have a plan to get the championship back to the Four Horsemen, and this seemed to be the plan, and nothing happened with it. not only does the Giant win, nothing happens. So why any of this?
Wasn't a great way to end the night, but the night isn't over for us, Joseph, because now we got to move over to Sioux City, Iowa for WWF Raw. Starts with some Madison Square Garden highlights where nothing really of importance appears to have happened. And then we get right into it, Joseph, because we start with Steve Austin and Mark Marrow. During the match of note, Vince announces that the Body Donans have lost the WWF Tag Team Championships. Okay, well, we didn't see that. All right. This really should be Austin versus Sable, considering she gets more TV time than Marrow. And Savio Vega comes in with the Caribbean strap to beat Austin. And so Austin wins via disqualification. What'd you think?
I honestly like this. I gave this a B+. This might be the highlight of the night for me. I can't remember what happens after this. We'll see when we get there. I thought this was a very good mid-card matchup. This is the kind of stuff that we should be seeing weekly, and we really haven't been up until this point. It's kind of weird to describe Austin as a mid-carder with what we know about him now, but at this point, this is what he is. It's a very lengthy opener, which is really good, and it's an actual match, which is also good. And Savio Vega beating up Austin heightens their rivalry going into the pay-per-view that I think happens next weekend. So I'm for it. I think it works all around. Everybody kind of got to shine here. Rivalry continues, which is good. Got a B+ for me.
Yeah, I thought it was a good match. After the match, Ahmed Johnson, we discover, won the Kuwait Cup. They were over in Kuwait entertaining our troops, and Ahmed Johnson won the Kuwait Cup. So, all right. I doubt you have anything to say about that, but do you before I move on?
I think this is the bit where Sean cries or something like that about being in Kuwait. I don't know. It's
beautiful.
fine. It is what it is. I at least from a global standpoint, it's kind of cool. Beyond that, I don't have much to say.
Yeah, they do stuff like this. And, Sean loves America, and we love Sean. So it's all right. After that, though, which I'm sure this is an item that you're going to talk at great length about. The Ultimate Warrior has a comic book, and he was off signing copies of it. And he also apparently has a belief system. Apparently, he's got a religion now called Destructicity. And what the hell's going on, Joseph?
No one knows what's going on with Ultimate Warrior ever. The comic book, I believe, did not sell well at all. In fact, I think WWF had to buy most of the comics just to get it to, like, quote unquote sell. But if you buy your own comic, it doesn't really. Who cares? It's nonsense. It's more Ultimate Warrior nonsense. We've got a few more months of this or a few more weeks of this or whatever it is. And then we can rest easy, not seeing him on our TV ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta say, WWF thought they were going to make themselves some money on the Ultimate Warrior with the Ultimate Warrior University, with the comic books, and it just blows up in their faces, the whole thing.
It does, yeah.
After that, we got Savio Vega and 1-2-3 Kid. This is the Kid's last match, man, in WWF. Ted DiBiase joins the commentary table, and he and Jerry make Puerto Rican jokes. Offensive Puerto Rican jokes, and Steve Austin. And Savio Vega wins, because of course he does, because it's 1-2-3 Kid's last match. He's out of the company. And Steve Austin comes out and attacks Vega. Ted DiBiase puts a chauffeur hat on him, because remember, there's a stipulation about whoever loses. If Savio loses the strap match at the pay-per-view, he's got to be Ted's chauffeur. And then Austin beats him with a leather strap. What did you think?
I overall like this. I gave it a B, mostly because the storyline does come back with the whole Austin thing. 1-2-3 Kid has one of my favorite leg drops in history. It's very quick. It's almost got a snap to it. It's really nice. This is back-to-back fun matches to me. Lawler, like you said, is making racist comments. He actually gets so racist on commentary that even Vince is like, Jesus Christ, and starts talking over Lawler so you can't hear what he's saying. And I tell you what, Vince will shit on your head, but he won't shit on your flag.
Allegedly. Dude may be out of WWF, but he still got tons of money and lawyers.
Austin tags Vega back, which honestly I think is really short-sighted on Vega's part, because it was a match ago. Would you think you were going to get no freaking retaliation? And I will say the image of Vega tied up with the chauffeur's hat on him while he's kind of knocked out, I thought was a really good cut to commercial. It's a really good closing image.
Yeah, I think this is good heat. I like this. I think they've really made me interested in this match where I otherwise probably would not have been interested in it for the pay-per-view. I think they've done a good job. After that, though, is something that I think we're probably gonna have to talk about at some length, and hopefully I've unpacked this enough to where we can talk about it at some length. We have more Madison Square Garden highlights, and I noticed that they show Sean. Sean makes an appearance, but I don't see anything from the match. I don't even know who he wrestled. That's mighty peculiar, Joseph. Do you have any thoughts on why this might be?
I mean, no, nothing notable happened, right?
Nothing at all, huh?
All right, we'll give an abridged version. I'm gonna try to maybe go into this long form because again, we don't want this show to be like an hour and a half.
Honestly,
We
I think we've compacted this enough. I mean, up next is the main event. I think you have enough time. Just shoot your shot, man. Just go.
All right. So Madison Square Garden, this moment is a big moment in wrestling history, which is it happens on May 19th, 1996, which just so happens to be the same day as the pay-per-view for WCW, which is Slamboree, but this has nothing to do with that. So essentially what you have here is two things converging at the same time. The first being what's called kayfabe, and the second being the click. Let's start with the first. What exactly is kayfabe? I hear somebody potentially asking. Yes, this is a wrestling podcast, but there's somebody out there who has no idea what we're talking about.
What's kayfabe?
Kayfabe is it's a term to describe the active practice of wrestlers, both good and bad, managers, referees, bookers, and everyone else in the wrestling industry to sell the idea that what you saw in the ring is a reality. So here's some examples of potential kayfabe. Wrestler A and B have become bitter rivals, but behind the scenes, the two performers are dear friends. That's totally fine, but those two performers are expected to never be seen together in public during the extent of their rivalry. If they accidentally bump into each other, they should act hostile to kind of sell this illusion that they really do hate each other. Here's another example. Does a particular wrestler have a manager or a tag team partner? Then they should ride together everywhere, go out in public together, etc. Last example, wrestler gets quote unquote hurt on TV. Guess what? When they go out, they should be wearing whatever fake cast or brace that you see on TV to sell the fact that they are legitimately hurt. Obviously, people kind of played a little bit loose with this over the years, but this is the quote unquote idea of what should be happening if you are a performer in the wrestling industry. It may sound absurd, but this is kind of before the internet was such a public thing, or this is right around the time when the internet's going to start taking over. So the ability to convince the audience was far greater, and wrestlers going to these lengths helped to drive up ticket sales and pay-per-view buy rates because it was believable. To break kayfabe in any sort of way was a sin against wrestling and the wrestling industry, and it would be met with severe punishment. So for instance, here's a few examples of that happening. In 1987, Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik rode together even though they were feuding. They had an open beer in the car, and it was spotted by a state trooper who arrested them after the Sheik revealed that he had 3 grams of cocaine, and Duggan said he had marijuana in the car. The arrest actually made headlines, and upon their release from prison, Vince McMahon fired them immediately because they broke kayfabe. They weren't supposed to be together. The arrest honestly didn't matter. People got arrested all the time. Kayfabe was also a global thing. This is not just a United States thing. In Japan, during a match, Koji Katao, I believe his name was, tried to shoot fight, also known as really fight, John Tenta because he didn't want to lose to a WWF wrestler. He got a little bit more than he bargained for in John Tenta, and so he stormed out, grabbed a mic, and shouted that wrestling was fake. He was fired immediately. There are plenty of examples other than this. You can look them all up. These two examples I pulled from an article by David Bixenspan on WrestleInc.com. I'll try to link that in the description. So if you are interested, you can see some more examples. But this is a common thing in wrestling to this point. Now, I mentioned kayfabe, and I also mentioned the click. So what is the click if you don't know? The click was spelled KLIQ, a group of young wrestlers who became both a brotherhood of rising stars as well as a political nightmare for wrestling in the 90s. The Clique, like most things in wrestling, were a balance of positive and negative forces that created a cultural shift in the landscape of wrestling. If you love modern wrestling, a lot of it is thanks to the Clique. If you hate modern wrestling, you probably hate the Clique. It goes both ways. Sidebar on this real quickly. One of the hilarious things to me in modern wrestling is fans who hate the Clique are the exact same fans who love the Elite. And it's really just kind of a watered down, less famous version of the Clique. Granted, also involving less drugs, alcohol, and sexual depravity, but backstage politicking is relatively the same. So who were the Clique? Who were the individuals who made this up? The first is Sean Waltman, aka the 123 Kid, who we see here in this episode. 123 Kid, to my understanding, was returning from rehab. So he doesn't really get involved in what's going to happen on this night. He is a member of the Clique, so we got to talk about him. He's easily the least successful member of the Clique, and that's not downplaying his career in any sort of way. By the end of his time in wrestling, he'd be a former X Division champion in TNA, a cruiserweight and tag team champion in WCW. In the WWF, he'd have won the European Championship twice, the Light Heavyweight Championship twice, the Tag Team Championship 4 times, and be a 2-time WWE Hall of Famer. Next, there's Scott Hall, also known as, at this time, Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon, at this point in this podcast, has held the WWF Intercontinental Championship 4 times. By the end of his career, he would become a WCW television champion, a 2-time United States champion, and a 7-time tag team champion, as well as being in the WWE Hall of Fame twice. Also having received the honor of Match of the Year by both Pro Wrestling Illustrated and the Wrestling Observer newsletter in 1994. Next, there was Paul Levesque, aka Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who at this point in the podcast has not held the championship, and he never would.
Ever?
Unless you count his 2-time reign as European champion, his once as WWE Tag Team Champion, twice as WWF World Tag Team Champion, 5 times as Intercontinental Champion, King of the Ring winner, 2-time Royal Rumble winner, Triple Crown Champion, Grand Slam Champion, 5-time World Heavyweight Champion, 9-time WWF/E Champion, and oh yeah, he runs the whole fucking company now.
He's doing all right.
But if you don't count those things, he's done jack diddly in wrestling history. The next person we have is Kevin Nash.
It's whatever. It's whatever, man. It's whatever.
Yeah. The next person we have is Kevin Nash, aka Diesel. That's what he's going by at this point. Diesel at this time has been a WWF Tag Team Champion twice. He's been the Intercontinental Champion and the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. By the end of his career, he'd be a former TNA Tag Team Champion, a 2-time TNA Legends Champion, a 9-time WCW Tag Team Champion, and a 5-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, as well as being a 2-time WWE Hall of Famer. Last, but certainly not least, we have the current WWF Champion, Shawn Michaels. Let's go over his achievements real quick, because it's going to get worse. By this point, Shawn has been a WWF Tag Team Champion twice, Intercontinental Champion 3 times, and he's won the Royal Rumble twice. And obviously, like I said, he's now the current WWF Champion. By the end of his career, he would add the European Championship. He'd win the Tag Team Champions 3 times, WWF Tag Team Champions. He'd add a WWE Tag Team Championship. He would have 2 more title reigns as WWF Champion. He'd win the World Heavyweight Championship. He'd be a Triple Crown Champion, and he was the very first Grand Slam Champion. He would be recognized with Match of the Year 4 times by Wrestling Observer newsletter, one of which was his match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 that he only got 4 3/4 stars for because Dave Meltzer's petty.
That was actually better than I thought was gonna go. Petty was I was about to go like, oh God, allegedly. But I'll live with petty. Fine, that's fine.
Pro Wrestling Illustrated gave him Match of the Year 11 times, which I had to look it up, is a record. The next highest is a tie between Bruno Sammartino and Ric Flair at 5 times each. Now that we've got the achievements out of the way, we kind of have to talk about the bad. Shawn Michaels is well known historically at this time for being kind of a less than stellar person. There probably isn't a single wrestler in WWF at this point to about 1999 who does not have some sort of Shawn Michaels story. On top of that, Shawn Michaels himself has talked about the fact that he was not easy to get along with, citing things like his drug and alcohol use stemming from not knowing who he was and feelings of impersonating this character of the Heartbreak Kid. He's referred to himself as not just an addict, but an angry addict. Vince McMahon has referred to Shawn during this time as an egomaniac, but that Shawn often had great ideas and performed so well in the ring that it was easier to give him a longer leash. Contemporaries believe HBK got preferential treatment, and many hated him for it. There are at least 3 documentaries of essentially Shawn Michaels. The first is through Heartbreak and Triumph. The second is actually about the Click as a whole, titled Click Rules. Both these are available on Peacock streaming services. And the most recent was an A&E docuseries that consisted of hour-and-a-half long episodes about many big names in WWE history. This series has been uploaded on YouTube by A&E, so I genuinely think you should check them out. There's a lot of great ones on there. All the documentaries essentially say the same thing. HBK at this time, not a great person, filled with demons. Also, that he had Vince's ear, and according to many wrestlers, waved around his political powers. Not quite Hulk Hogan level, but still. It's also important to note here, we talk about these things pretty normally on the show, so I'm not going to give too many details as far as backstage politicking at this point. We'll just talk about them as they come. What these documentaries don't say is that Shawn Michaels is the greatest wrestler who ever lived.
You know, I think he's definitely up there. He's in the pantheon of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Not my greatest wrestler of all time, but you know, you do you, champ. You do you.
All in all, the Click were not popular by their contemporaries. Most of them didn't like them. Most of them felt they waved their political power around. There have been countless conversations about different people getting pushed or not pushed. We mentioned previously Shane Douglas' situation. We've talked about that. I think there's some merit, and honestly, Shane Douglas, I don't think was an easy person to get along with at the same time. So I think it kind of goes both ways, but we've talked about this stuff. So now that we kind of know who the players are in this situation, and we know what kayfabe is and how you're not allowed to break it, that leads us to May 19th at Madison Square Garden in a situation that is called the curtain call. Again, I know that a lot of you already know what we're talking about, but chances are there's at least one person who doesn't. So this is really for them.
What's the curtain call?
As I said, 123 Kid was kind of coming out of rehab at this time. He was not here at this event, so he doesn't actually play a part in the situation. Leading up to this, Scott Hall had given notice that he was leaving WWF. By sheer chance, he received a suspension for substances that had nothing to do with the fact that WWF was hemorrhaging money and could avoid a WrestleMania payout. Obviously speculation, but the timing is suspect. Then Diesel let them know that he was also leaving. He timed it a little better and was already knee-deep in a storyline leading into WrestleMania, and WWF's probably number 3 guy at the time, behind Brett and Shawn Michaels. After Razor's suspension, both he and Diesel were used at house shows, and they had a big one coming up with this particular event. The main event of this night was a steel cage match between Shawn Michaels and Diesel. As the match came to a close with Shawn winning, Razor Ramon came into the ring. Razor Ramon at this time is a good guy. Shawn Michaels is a good guy. Diesel is a bad guy. Then Hunter Hearst Helmsley comes into the ring. And eventually all 4 men begin to hug each other and celebrate with each other because this is the last time that they will be in a WWF ring together. So now you have 2 good guys and 2 bad guys hugging each other at the same time in front of Madison Square Garden, which is packed every time they come to town. They're breaking quote unquote kayfabe. It was an important gesture for all 4 men. The problem is, it was very, very heavily criticized backstage. Now, this probably would have gotten away with it with very light punishment if that was it. What they didn't know was there was somebody in the audience who was actually recording this on a camcorder. I believe their names are Manny Motati and Jason Cosmides. So they recorded this incident and then they released it on the internet and it spread like wildfire. This was kind of one of the first viral situations, at least in terms of wrestling. Now the quote unquote smart wrestling fans, and I'm again, severe air quotes on that, knew about this quote unquote curtain call. Backstage people were furious. According to Vince, he had allowed them to do this, but after the footage leaked, he had to take action. Like I said, 123 Kid wasn't around and didn't participate, so he would not get punished for this. This was also the last appearance for Razor Ramon and Diesel, so you couldn't punish them. Shawn Michaels was your WWF champion, so he couldn't really be punished as a top guy in the company. That really only left Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Helmsley had to meet with Vince, who told him, quote, "You need to learn to eat shit and like it." That's apparently the real quote. You can find it in both the Click Rules documentary as well as the documentary Triple H The Game. Helmsley, instead of whining and complaining, accepted the punishment. He wasn't released. He just had to be jobbed out for a while. Helmsley bet on himself and accepted the punishment. For the next 5 months, Helmsley would lose weekly on Raw and at house shows. If he was booked on a pay-per-view, he would be on the losing end here too. The biggest impact of all of this was the fact that he had already been scheduled to be the 1996 King of the Ring winner. So much so that he was informed of this prior to the curtain call. That spot was taken away from him and handed to some upstart named Stone Cold Steve Austin. But we'll get there. Now, 5 months can be viewed as a long time or a short time, depending on perspective. For the locker room that already hated the Kliq and felt that Helmsley, much like his character, was a snob, they were pleasantly surprised by how well he took the punishment. He actually gained respect over those 5 months that he previously never had. In 2024, the idea of kayfabe looks archaic, depending on who you ask, and there's certainly pluses and minuses to it. A plus is when wrestlers feud with each other on social media and it helps to heighten their on-screen rivalry. Good example of this is CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. A minus is when Lana and Rusev were married and got in trouble for celebrating it publicly in 2015. The idea of kayfabe has a lot of gray areas these days. MJF is kind of a great example of kayfabe still alive in 2024. On the one hand, his antics on Twitter are revered for pushing forward kayfabe. On the other hand, his antics in public or with fans physically are often criticized, like throwing a drink on a kid at AEW Revolution in 2023. Some people say he's perfect. Some people say he goes too far. That's kind of kayfabe in a nutshell. Depending on who you ask, it's either not enough or it's too much. That gray area of perfect is so thin these days, it really allows things to become viral at any given moment. But in 96, that gray area really didn't exist. It was black and white. You were one or the other. The Kliq broke the rules and let everyone know that wrestling wasn't quite as real as they were led to believe. If you've heard this show in the past, me and Scott will often drop a reference that says, hey, wrestling's real at this point. That's a tongue-in-cheek way of us basically referencing May 19th, 1996, where wrestling from that point on was no longer real. Many old-timers really viewed it this way, though. A lot of people were severely, severely pissed about this. At the end of the day, this is kind of what the Kliq achieved. They allowed relief from the constant burden of kayfabe, not just in this, but in future exploits like the NWO and D-Generation X. They allowed kayfabe to become a gray area and not a constant lifestyle. With that said, the story of the current call comes to a close and basically sets up for what we have here. So if we watch this show or we listen to this show going forward, we're going to see Hunter Hearst Helmsley lose over and over and over again in matches he desperately shouldn't. But that's the situation that kind of happened yesterday and leads us into today.
Bravo. Does that ever pick up?
It doesn't. It doesn't. Your clapping doesn't pick up, and it always sounds like you're slapping meat.
Well, we love slapping meat here at the Monday Night Wars. So, no, yeah, this is the curtain call is the day wrestling changed, right? It was kind of when everyone just accepted that it wasn't real. I mean, they still keep kayfabe, obviously. You mentioned MJF. Cody Rhodes is another guy who just will not break kayfabe, and I respect him for it. I mean, everyone kind of knows now, right? It used to be like people would get wrestling fans would get real mad at someone going, it's fake, right? Now everyone knows it's fake, but that doesn't matter. We still enjoy it. And but the curtain calls where that all happened. It's the day that kind of changed everything. But we still got one more match, Joseph.
We do?
Yes. Yes, we got one match in 11 minutes. Let's wrap this show up for the people. Keep it tight. Keep it under an hour. We got Davey Boy Smith. We got Jake the Snake Roberts. The match really doesn't matter. The point of the match is to continue this Shawn Michaels, Davey Boy Smith rivalry. Shawn Michaels is supposed to be on commentary, but it turns out Jim Cornette got his lawyer, Clarence Mason, to get a restraining order against Shawn. He can't be within 100 yards of Diana Hart Smith, so he can't do commentary. But wait, Gorilla Monsoon comes out and says, not so fast, Diana. You're banned from ringside. Shawn can do the commentary. And then the whole match is basically Shawn arguing with Jerry about the rumors and the allegations. And Shawn, there is kind of a moment where I think Vince kind of breaks character because the Playgirl shoot gets mentioned, and Vince says that he thought it was a poor choice, especially that now he's the champion and the face of the company, and they market to kids. I thought that was kind of an interesting angle. I was like, Vince, you shooting there for a second? However,
I mean, look, that's all fine and good, but I got 2 copies, one for display and one for cardio.
Yeah, one for when you clapping, as they say. Anyways, eventually, though, Diana Hart Smith comes out. There's an altercation with her and Shawn. She throws water at him. Davey Boy Smith starts fighting him. They brawl. The match is a no contest. That's pretty much it. You got anything more?
Overall, it was done pretty well. It got a B for me. I liked what Gorilla Monsoon did. I thought that worked really well because we had, the WWF had promised that Sean would be on commentary. So they were able to still deliver with that. Really, anytime Gorilla Monsoon gets involved with something, I really like what he adds to it. Beyond that, I'm not super fond of, this rivalry. Obviously, we've talked about that at great length. The match itself is fine. Bulldog and Jake the Snake do a good job in the match. There is actually one line from Jerry that I did like, which is he says to Sean, because Sean is trying to, plead his case. It's actually really funny because it's kind of like what Drake is doing right now in real life, where he's trying to convince everybody that he's not a pedophile. And it's like, if you have to say you're not a pedophile, that's a problem. Anyways, Sean's basically saying that he didn't do any of this over and over and over. And Jerry says, "You can swear on a stack of Bibles and I wouldn't believe you." And I thought that was a pretty good line from Jerry. USA chants happen. How crazy would that be if Hacksaw just showed up out of nowhere and just started throwing hands to everybody?
It would have been fantastic.
But yeah, this is kind of whatever. I do like that Sean punches Cornette. Cornette's always willing to take a bump, but it is just kind of a good match. Commentary can be a little irritating, kind of is what it is.
Yeah, but the match itself really just a vehicle to sell this storyline that, while maybe handled well in this particular segment, we don't particularly like. But that's it for the night. Who won and what do the fans think? What do the viewers think?
Well, I think personally WCW won. I think other than their really, really bad showing, I thought it was a pretty good episode. I thought Raw was actually a pretty good episode in general too. I liked both episodes. I think I'm going to give the edge to WCW.
I think you're right. I think I would give it to WCW too. But what did the fans think? What rating did Raw receive?
Interestingly enough, Raw dropped pretty drastically to a 2.3.
And Nitro rose pretty dramatically to a 3.1. What's going on? Do people know it's coming? Because boy, it's coming. And I'm not talking about the clapping sounds.
You're not talking about Shawn Michaels' Playgirl?
No, I'm talking about tune in next week because ground is about to shift. 83 weeks is nearly upon us. So join us again next week for the Monday Night Wars because it's about to change. The world order is about to shift, Joseph. Can I be any more clear about why people need to tune in next week?
Do I get this reference or am I an outsider?
Whoa! You're not really that big of a wrestling. I feel like you don't even know what I'm talking about. I feel like you're not really a wrestling fan. I feel like I know who you are, but I don't know why you're here.
Hey, yo, I can't believe you dissed me like that.
Well, it is what it is. All I got to say is that I am on a razor's edge for next week. And thank you all so much for listening again to the Monday Night Wars. I am Scott. With me is Joseph. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Hey, everybody, it's Joseph. And guess what? Not only can you listen to us every Monday on Spotify, but you can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and YouTube Podcasts as well. Just search for Monday Night Wars Podcast. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at MON Night Wars Pod, on Instagram at Monday Night Wars Podcast, or just email us at mnwpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, subscribe to our Patreon at Monday Night Wars Podcast. For $2 a month, you get every pay-per-view from WCW and WWF during this era, as well as additional content later on. Once again, thank you for listening. We'll see you here next time on the Monday Night Wars Podcast.
I'm coughing. It's fine. We'll keep it going. That'll probably sound weird too, my cough. But anyways.